Hello, everyone. My name is Hane Crevelari, and I am so honored to be joined today by two very special guests, the Chief Economist of Fundación Libertad y Progreso, Iván Cachanosky, and the Project Manager of CDE Great Lakes, Bruce Vaillant. They are both accomplished grantees from Atlas Network's Global Voice for Open Trade program, and we bring to the table their expertise to discuss trade and the global economy during the pandemic. And although they are from very different regions, both Fundación Libertad y Progreso and CDE Great Lakes have a very common goal, which it is to promote free trade in their countries. And the pandemic, however, presented many challenges in accomplishing this goal. In the first half of 2020, we have seen an almost 13% decline in global GDP due to a combination of factors, including unnecessary trade barriers. But despite that, we know that every crisis brings opportunities for transformational change. And with that in mind, I would like to start by asking our guests, what are the two biggest challenges and the one single biggest opportunity the pandemic offered to your work on promoting free trade? And Iván, let's start with you in the context of Argentina and the Mercosur.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Atlas Network for the invitation. Very glad to be here. Okay, I think the challenges for Argentina are many, taking into account that it's a closed economy. But if I had to highlight two challenges, I think they will be that the Mercosur-EU agreement remains in the background due to the pandemic. And it also, the pandemic harms Argentina's low competitiveness. So regarding the first point, the quarantine in Argentina lasted near 8 months. We are 3 of those months the Congress was closed without operating. So this delayed the agenda, and among them, the debate on Mercosur-EU agreement. However, what I think is this debate should be on the foreground as much as possible in Argentina, because as I say, it's the closest economy country to the world, where there is a very bad perception of trade. On the other hand, Argentina is a country with very low competitiveness because for more than 60 years, it has turned its back on international trade. So consequently, all competitive factors that affect labor market, productivity, foreign direct investment are deteriorated. To name a few examples, Argentina has a tax burden on companies that is among the highest in the world. The level of public expenditure is record in the region. And all this in a context where labor litigation has grown a lot in the last 10 years. We can add high import costs, little respect for property rights, low institutional quality can also be highlighted, a lot of things. And finally, perhaps one of the best opportunities is that both government and opposition believe that encouraging exports to grow is important. So in a context where the pandemic has damaged the real economy, the support that the favorable agreement, such as the Mercosur-EU, can bring is extremely significant. And on this, I mean, one of the most important pillars of a possible Mercosur-EU agreement is that the EU is our second most important export destination.
Iván, I have a follow-up question for you in regards to the opportunity you just mentioned, in which politicians are now more interested in promoting exports in Argentina. That sounds a lot like this mercantilistic mentality that became popular in the last few years, and that is true for the US, and it seems to be true for Argentina as well. Is there a way to repeal this mercantilistic approach and instead pursue trade policies that promote both exports and imports? And if so, do you see that being possible unilaterally, bilaterally, or maybe through the Mercosur agreement itself?
Well, it is true that the argument sounds like a mercantilistic mentality, but I do not think they are seeing the government with that vision. Basically, the problem in Argentina is that one of the biggest concerns of the current government is that we have no more dollars because nobody wants to invest in Argentina. So government see export as a tool for Argentina, for Argentina to have more dollars. And as you mentioned it very well, they are not thinking about trade policies. But solving problems in the exchange market and trade policy are very different problems. On the contrary, an eventual Mercosur-EU agreement will generate incentives to promote both exports and imports, which of course is a much healthier policy. So in summary, my hope, I think, is that this attempt to promote exports from Argentina, along with an adverse economic context, maybe government finally understand that what really matters are the trade policies that favor both exports and imports, and that Mercosur-EU agreement can be a very good tool to achieve this objective. If this doesn't happen, I think that it can happen with other countries like Brazil, for example, bilaterally.
Perfect. Bruce, turning to you, what about you? One of the ways CD Great Lakes works towards its goal is by facilitating entry and exit into Burundi. And we all have experienced with the pandemic a whole other level of difficulty worldwide for entering and exiting certain countries. So much so that today we are having our Liberty Forum virtually and instead of in person in New York City. So can you share with us what you see to be the biggest opportunity and the biggest challenges in this crisis for the liberty movement in Burundi?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And also thank you for Atlas Network for this opportunity. So for Burundi, first of all, for people who are following us, Burundi is a small country in Central Africa, a landlocked country neighbored with countries like Rwanda, Tanzania, and Uganda, and which economy really rely on importing goods from those countries. One of the main challenges we have faced in this period CD Great Lakes for promoting the ideas of liberty is, first of all, the right to share and to talk about our ideas. Because since the pandemic have started entering in our country, the first position of the country was to say like the neighboring countries are the ones sending people with the virus to be spreaded in the country. So the first persons who was targeted was the truck drivers bringing goods from those countries to Burundi. This was also a big challenge for us because when we was talking about leaving the market free, leaving the borders open, it was like we was the enemy of the government. So this was very challenging situations because when we can't really use our ideas, it's very hard to work in this situation. And the other thing is that for our country, we really need to have partners. We really need to work with other people to make sure that our ideas have the biggest impact as possible. So in this situation, many of our partners, as the issue of COVID-19 was really regulated by the government, didn't really wanted to talk about this issue. And it was really hard for us to advance and continue working for our ideas without having our network, which we have already been building for our country. So, but also there are opportunities. There are opportunities because in Burundi we've got the chance to show to the government that closing the borders, closing the country, closing the businesses for small entrepreneurs wasn't a good solution. And the government took the right decision to open our borders. And now the truck drivers are able to continue working, and the economy have really started slowly, but at least it's good. And the second one is entrepreneurs, small entrepreneurs have got the chance to be listened. And that was really the first time to have small entrepreneurs being in committees to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, listened, and we hope that maybe for the future, they will still have that chance to speak and to be listened.
Bruce, as you mentioned, one thing the pandemic accomplished was to challenge the ideas of freedom all over the world. And we all know that economic freedom is the best weapon against poverty. And as a result of the pandemic, the World Bank predicts that at least 7 million people will be pushed back into extreme poverty. Some believe that trade is one of the most powerful tools for economic recovery, and I certainly believe that. So, Bruce, what's the single biggest way people in Burundi have suffered due to the pandemic, and what is the role for trade in helping people recover?
Yeah, as I mentioned, like for other countries, even in Burundi, businesses have really slowed. Restaurant, bars, and so on have been closed. But what is more difficult is when the country was closed, and then we didn't really in the economy there was no chance for people to continue their business and to have their small incomes. And in a country like Burundi, that means that people don't really have access to basic things like having access to food, having access to education, and that with only the action of opening up again the borders, we have seen how really this have impacted millions of people. Because if that situation have really continued in this way, it will be really catastrophic for the country. So we really have seen that trade, continuing having free trade in countries is a really strong, powerful weapon for the countries like ours to overcome poverty. Yeah.
Yes, trade encompasses so much and affects everyone's daily lives, from the type of food one has access to their ability to earn an income. And that has often been forgotten when policies are implemented on a whim. Iván, is the situation in Argentina similar to Burundi, and how can trade help them?
Well, I would say that the Argentine labor market has been hit very hard by the pandemic. This affected formal workers and informal workers much more. By informal workers, I mean unreported economy, no? To give some measure. Only in the formal sector, around 400,000 people have lost their jobs. This is almost 6% of all formal workers, and this happened only in just 3 months. And in the informal sector, the damage is bigger. And the situation is even worse if we take into account that the Argentine labor market is very rigid, and therefore rehiring people becomes very difficult. It is not easy to open again business that failed due to the pandemic, but also due to a prolonged quarantine. In addition, I must say that we must bear in mind that Argentina was stagnant since 2011, which was practically a crisis in and out of itself before the COVID-19 arrived. Regarding benefits of trade, a potential Mercosur-EU agreement will enhance, I think, 3 pillars for Argentina. First, as I have already mentioned it before, exports could grow fast because the EU is our second biggest trading partner. Secondly, the promotion of European foreign direct investment to our country. And thirdly, that the agreement is designed to be gradual, granting us terms of up to 15 years for trade opening. So this is important because allow us to enjoy the benefits in the short term and to assume the cost in the long term. Of course, this is going to require structural reforms to be made, but it will take up to 15 years to do so. So I think that here, the main obstacle is a populist government that does not want to carry out these reforms.
Well, it is clear that keeping trade flows is of extreme importance, especially during such a critical period. But doing that requires cooperation and trust, not only among private entities and individuals, but between governments. Iván, could you share what successes Libertad y Progreso have had in ensuring this trust and cooperation in Argentina or in Latin America?
Well, I think there are a few signs at the moment, but positive ones. However, they have gone unnoticed by the media for now, some of them. But concerning the public sector, first, 2 points to highlight. I want to highlight 2 points. First, the revision of the political and cooperation chapter of the Mercosur-EU agreement was finalized in June of this year, and that is according to schedule, and that's a very important sign. And on the other hand, our Chancellor has recently met with the EU ambassadors and some private entrepreneurs to promote exports, which are both good signs too. The private sector has much to do too, but it must first commit itself to improve competitiveness. Only 1.5% of our company exports, and only 3 provinces exports more than $5 billion per year. These figures are very low. So Libertad y Progreso Fundación, it's already talking to entrepreneurs to work all together for making exports easier. We are also approaching congressmen, and we are going to continue this in 2021. And we already had a meeting with the Brazilian embassy where they were very optimistic about the Mercosur-EU agreement. So I think that in this context, all the countries have to take action to promote trade, as you say. For example, keep trading flowing, improve coordination between the public and private sector, because public sector can't handle this crisis by themselves. Prevent protectionism from growing, and this means to consider very carefully which sector government will be involved and which ones can government exit as soon as possible. This is important to avoid market distortions.
Perfect. Bruce, Burundi's economy is very dependent on trading goods with its neighboring countries, which means this cooperation and trust is essential for its prosperity. So how have you and your team promoted cooperation in Burundi, and have you had any positive results that you can share with us?
Yeah, I just want to mention that the COVID situation have affected Burundi with its very weak healthcare system, because we have a ratio of 2 specialist doctors for 2,000 inhabitant Burundians. And then our government was in a really bad situation, and they didn't really have a solution to bring for the people of Burundi to say this is the response of the COVID-19. So the strategy of the government was to say, as I mentioned, to say this virus, it's the problem from the neighboring countries. It's the problem from the people who are coming with goods from neighboring countries. Those are the persons who are bringing all the viruses for our country. So this brought a situation of raising of protectionism for citizens of Burundi, and there was it was really a challenging situation. And but for us, what was more important for us was to show to the government this is not the right period to be like in conflict with our neighboring countries. We showed to the government that we really need to be hand in hand with the neighboring countries and to start working. And then the solution which came out was to allow private hospitals to test, to having tests the people entering in the country. So since the testing was was authorized to the private hospitals, and then we started to see that there was more confidence and to allow people doing their business entering in the country. So that was a really amazing thing for CDE Great Lakes.
Wow, allowing private hospitals to provide COVID-19 tests seems like an obvious step in alleviating consequences of the pandemic. But many places around the world, that's just not the case, just like in Burundi. And it seems like it took a lot of effort from CDE, Great Lakes, and other actors to push for this change. And this is a great example of how the private sector plays a huge role in finding solutions for problems caused by the pandemic, including promoting the exchange of goods and services in a safe manner. And that is the power of free markets and free trade. Free markets allow for innovation to grow and expand and problems to be solved. Imagine what it could do on a global scale. I want to thank our guests very much for participating, and I would like to open the floor for questions. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask directly to the participants. Well, no questions? No problem. Thank you so much for coming, everybody, and please join us on our next session at 2:15 with the new findings in the Global Index of Economic Value.